The homeless man in torn clothes was about to be sentenced to 5 years for a crime he didn't commit. The corrupt judge was already reaching for his gavel, smirking at what he thought was an easy conviction. But what he didn't know was that the ragged man standing before him wasn't homeless at all, and the phone call he'd made from his cell had just activated a protocol that would bring his entire world crashing down. Welcome to Shadows of Service. Tell us what city you're watching from today. And if this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. The rain hammered the streets of Camden City as Detective Ray Morrison pulled his patrol car up to the convenience store. The call had come in 20 minutes earlier, armed robbery, suspect still on scene. Morrison stepped out, adjusting his badge with the confidence of someone who had never been questioned in his 15-year career. Inside the store, he found the owner, Mr. Chen, visibly shaken and pointing toward a man in the corner. The suspect sat quietly on a plastic chair, wearing a torn military jacket, faded jeans, and boots that had seen better days. His hair was unkempt, his beard scraggly, and he carried the weathered look of someone who'd been living rough. "That's him," Chen said nervously. He came in, demanded money from the register, said he had a weapon. Morrison studied the man, noting the obvious signs of homelessness. This would be straightforward, another veteran who'd fallen through the cracks, probably desperate for drug money. Easy arrest, easy conviction, easy promotion points. "What's your name?" Morrison demanded. The man looked up with remarkably calm eyes. "James Mitchell." "You got ID, Mitchell?" James reached slowly into his jacket and produced a worn driver's license. Morrison glanced at it, expired 6 months ago, address listed as a homeless shelter. "Mr. Chen says you robbed his store. You want to tell me your side?" James's voice was steady, controlled. "I came in to buy coffee. Had exact change." Mr. Chen seemed nervous, kept looking toward the back room. "I asked if everything was okay." Morrison wasn't interested in alternative narratives. The store owner was clearly the victim here, and this homeless vet was clearly the perpetrator. "Save it for the judge, Mitchell. You're under arrest." As the handcuffs clicked into place, James said quietly, "Detective, you might want to check that back room before you close this case." Morrison ignored him. He'd seen enough homeless veterans trying to deflect blame. In his experience, they were all the same, broken, desperate, and dishonest. At the precinct, Morrison filled out his report with practiced efficiency. Subject appeared to be under the influence, exhibited erratic behavior, made threatening statements to store owner. Classic case of a veteran gone wrong. In the holding cell, James made his one phone call. He dialed a number from memory and spoke 4 words that would change everything. "Raven's Nest is compromised." The voice on the other end was sharp, alert. "Authentication? Bravo 77 Delta." A pause, then, confirmed. "Status? Detained under false pretenses. Camden City Police Department. Request immediate intervention." "Copy that. Stand by for orders." The line went dead. 48 hours later, James stood in Camden Municipal Court wearing the same clothes he'd been arrested in. The public defender assigned to his case, a tired-looking woman named Lisa Park, had barely glanced at the file. "Mr. Mitchell," she whispered, "the evidence is pretty clear. Store owner's testimony, detective's report, your presence at the scene. I'd recommend pleading guilty to a lesser charge." James shook his head. "I need this to go to trial." "Sir, with respect, you can't afford a trial. You're looking at 5 years minimum if convicted. Take the plea deal." "No. Full trial." Judge Harold Brennan took the bench with his usual air of superiority. At 62, he'd been on the bench for 20 years, and in that time, he'd developed certain flexible interpretations of justice. Especially when it came to defendants who couldn't fight back. The prosecutor, Assistant DA Patricia Wells, presented her case with confidence. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward armed robbery. The defendant, a homeless individual with a history of mental health issues, threatened the store owner and demanded money." Morrison took the stand and delivered his rehearsed testimony. "The suspect was clearly agitated, Your Honor. When I arrived, he was making threatening gestures toward Mr. Chen. Classic case of someone desperate for drug money." Judge Brennan nodded approvingly. He'd worked with Morrison before, the detective understood how things worked in Camden. Cases got closed, statistics looked good, and everyone benefited. Mr. Chen testified next, his story now polished and detailed. He said he had a gun, demanded I open the register. I was terrified for my life. James watched from the defendant's table, his expression unreadable. Lisa Park mounted a weak defense, but her heart wasn't in it. She'd seen too many cases like this, homeless defendants with no resources going up against the system. Your Honor, she said half-heartedly, my client maintains his innocence. He was simply purchasing coffee when this misunderstanding occurred. Judge Brennan looked down at James with barely concealed contempt. Mr. Mitchell, you've heard the testimony against you. The evidence is overwhelming. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence? James stood slowly. Your Honor, I respectfully request that you examine the security footage from the store's back room. Brennan frowned. What security footage? The cameras that recorded what actually happened in that store, Your Honor. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd never asked about additional cameras. Your Honor, Wells interjected, there's no mention of additional footage in the police report. Judge Brennan was growing impatient. Mr. Mitchell, stop wasting this court's time. Detective Morrison conducted a thorough investigation. Did he check the back room, Your Honor? That's enough, Brennan snapped. I've heard sufficient evidence. Mr. Mitchell, I find you guilty of armed robbery in the first degree. Given your apparent instability and lack of fixed address, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison. He reached for his gavel with obvious satisfaction. Another case closed, another vagrant off the streets. But before the gavel could fall, the courtroom doors burst open. A man in full military dress uniform strode down the center aisle, 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders, chest heavy with ribbons and medals. Behind him walked 2 MPs in crisp uniforms, their faces stern and professional. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Even Judge Brennan lowered his gavel, confusion replacing his smug confidence. The general stopped directly in front of the bench. Your Honor, I am General William Hayes, Joint Chiefs of Staff. I need to speak with you immediately regarding this defendant. Brennan's face had gone pale. General, this court is in session. If you have concerns about the defendant, you'll need to file proper paperwork. Judge Brennan, the general's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade, the man you're about to sentence is Colonel James Mitchell, United States Army Special Forces. He's currently on a classified deep cover assignment. The words hit the courtroom like a physical force. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Wells looked like she'd been slapped. General Hayes continued, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command. Colonel Mitchell has been working undercover for the past 6 months, investigating a human trafficking ring operating out of legitimate businesses in the city. He turned to face Morrison directly. Detective, when you arrested the colonel, did you examine the back room of that convenience store? Morrison's mouth was dry. The store owner said. The store owner, Mr. Chen, is currently the subject of a federal investigation. The back room you ignored contains evidence of a trafficking operation involving minors. The general's aide stepped forward and handed Judge Brennan a folder marked with federal seals. Your Honor, this contains Colonel Mitchell's service record, his current assignment orders, and authorization from the Department of Defense for this operation. Brennan opened the folder with trembling hands. His face went through a series of expressions, shock, disbelief, and finally, pure terror as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Furthermore, General Hayes said, his voice now ice-cold, every conversation in this courtroom for the past month has been recorded as part of our ongoing investigation into judicial corruption in Camden County. He nodded to his aide, who produced a digital recorder and pressed play. Judge Brennan's voice filled the courtroom. Morrison, make sure this case stays simple. We don't need any complications. The homeless guy takes the fall, Chen stays clean, and everyone goes home happy. The silence that followed was deafening. General Hayes turned back to the judge. Judge Brennan, you have just attempted to sentence a decorated Army colonel to 5 years in prison for investigating crimes you apparently knew about. Detective Morrison, you arrested a federal officer while he was conducting an authorized operation. Morrison tried to speak, but no words came. His career, his pension, his future, everything was crashing down around him. Colonel Mitchell, General Hayes said, his tone shifting to one of respect, report. James stood at attention. Sir, the trafficking ring is larger than initially suspected. At least 12 businesses in the downtown area are involved. Mr. Chen's store serves as a distribution hub. The children are moved through the back rooms during business hours. Evidence secured? Yes, sir. Full documentation uploaded to secure servers before my arrest. Judge Brennan was gripping his bench, his knuckles white. General, there must be some mistake. The only mistake, Judge Brennan, was thinking you were above the law. General Hayes turned to the court reporter. Let the record show that all charges against Colonel Mitchell are dismissed. Furthermore, this court is now under federal jurisdiction pending investigation into corruption charges. Federal agents who had been waiting outside now enter the courtroom. They approached Judge Brennan and Detective Morrison with handcuffs ready. Harold Brennan, the lead agent, announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy, corruption, and obstruction of justice." Ray Morrison, "You're under arrest for interfering with a federal investigation and conspiracy." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Morrison turned to James with desperate eyes. "You could have told me. You could have identified yourself." James's response was quiet but firm. "Detective, you never asked. You saw what you wanted to see, a homeless veteran you could dismiss. You never considered that appearances might be deceiving." Judge Brennan was escorted past the defendant's table, his judicial robes now looking more like a costume than a symbol of authority. "This is a mistake," he kept muttering. I'm a judge. I'm a judge." General Hayes addressed the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you've witnessed today is the result of Operation Raven's Nest, a joint military-civilian investigation into corruption and human trafficking. Colonel Mitchell's apparent homelessness was deep cover that allowed him to infiltrate organizations that prey on society's most vulnerable." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The real Mr. Chen, the store owner you heard testify, was arrested this morning along with 17 others in coordinated raids across the city. The man who testified was an undercover federal agent." The courtroom buzzed with amazed whispers. 37 children have been recovered and are receiving care. The trafficking network that has operated in this city for over 5 years has been completely dismantled. As the federal agents led away the corrupt officials, General Hayes turned to James. "Outstanding work, Colonel. You maintained your cover even when facing false imprisonment." James finally allowed himself a small smile. "Thank you, sir. Just doing my job." General Hayes addressed the remaining people in the courtroom. "Let this serve as a reminder that true service often happens in shadows, performed by heroes who receive no recognition. Today, justice was served not by the system, but in spite of it." Later that evening, James sat in a military debriefing room, finally out of his ragged clothes and back in uniform. The transformation was remarkable. The homeless man was gone, replaced by a decorated officer whose bearing commanded immediate respect. General Hayes reviewed the mission files. 6 months undercover, Colonel. That takes exceptional dedication. The children, sir. They needed someone to speak for them. And you did. 37 lives saved because you were willing to sacrifice your reputation, your comfort, and nearly your freedom." James looked out the window at the city lights. "Sir, how many other Judge Brennans are out there? How many Morrisons? More than we'd like, Colonel. But also more people like you. People willing to stand up when others look away." The next morning, the Camden City newspapers carried headlines about the massive corruption bust. But buried in the back pages was a small article about the homeless veteran who had been wrongly accused, though his real identity remained classified. In the comments section of the online article, dozens of people shared their own stories of being dismissed, ignored, or misjudged because of their appearance. Veterans especially resonated with the story, understanding how easily society could write off those who had given everything in service. James returned to his regular assignment, but the lessons of Operation Raven's Nest stayed with him. He'd learned that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign soil, but in courtrooms and city streets, against enemies who wear badges and robes instead of uniforms. Judge Brennan was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Detective Morrison received 10 years. Mr. Chen and his associates faced life sentences for their trafficking crimes. But the real victory was quieter, more personal. 37 children were safe. A city was free of predators who had operated with impunity. And the system that had failed so many finally faced consequences. 6 months later, James received a letter from one of the rescued children, a 12-year-old girl who had been trapped in the trafficking ring for 2 years. Her handwriting was shaky, but her message was clear: "Thank you for not giving up on us." That letter now sits framed on James's desk, next to his military commendations. Because sometimes the most important recognition comes not from generals or presidents, but from the people you've saved, people who know that true heroes don't always look like heroes. What do you think? Have you ever made assumptions about someone based on their appearance, only to discover you were completely wrong? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to Legendary Veterans for more incredible stories of hidden heroes who serve in the shadows. Remember, honor isn't always visible, courage doesn't always wear a uniform, and heroes sometimes look like the very people society has forgotten.